Men didn't ghost you. They outgrew the game. They just disappear. No fights. No goodbyes. Just silence, the kind that echoes longer than any apology. Because men finally realize the truth in this game. Love doesn't heal. It hunts. You give loyalty. You get laughed at. You give effort. You get ignored. You give your best. And somehow, you still lose. He's not broken. He's awake. He realized peace costs less than pretending to be valued. He realized romance isn't connection anymore. It's content. So he stopped auditioning for a part in someone else's performance. The world keeps shouting that men are the problem. But what happens when the so-called problem stops showing up? Everything starts to break. Dating, respect, trust, connection. Because here's the truth. No one dares to admit men didn't walk away because they're weak. They walked away because they finally did the math. And peace had the better return. This isn't hate. It's awareness. It's the sound of men waking up, and that silence isn't empty. It's proof. So, before you scroll, take a breath. Think about the last time you gave everything and got nothing. And if you felt that same exhaustion, drop a comment, because this next part is for you. Modern dating isn't romance anymore. It's an economy, a rigged one, where one side invests and the other side just collects. Every man remembers the first time he realized his effort didn't matter. It's a quiet kind of heartbreak, not loud, not dramatic, just a slow fade, where everything he does stops being seen. He still shows up, he still tries, but the warmth he used to believe in isn't there anymore. What's left is an invisible checklist he never agreed to fill. Be successful, be confident, be kind, but not too kind. Be strong, but not intimidating. Be emotional, but never emotional enough to inconvenience her. It's a moving target, and every miss feels like proof that he's failing at something nobody ever defined. So he adjusts, he upgrades, he learns, he builds himself. He becomes everything they said. Women wanted, only to find out that what women say they want and what they choose are two different worlds. He watches her pass on stability for excitement. He watches chaos win over character. And in that moment, he realizes the truth: he was never competing with other men. He was competing with her attention span. That realization changes a man. Not immediately, but deeply. He stops texting first, not out of pride, but because he's tired of writing paragraphs to people who answer with half a sentence. I had a guy DM me. He spent $200 on a date. She spent the night scrolling, posted the food, cropped him out of every picture, and then texted, "Thanks." Wasn't a vibe. That's when he deleted the apps for good. He stops over-explaining himself, not because he's cold, but because he's learned that vulnerability gets weaponized. He stops giving his time away freely, because every hour spent proving his worth is an hour stolen from his peace. What people call detachment is really self-defense. And somewhere between exhaustion and clarity, he starts seeing through the illusion. He realizes he was taught to perform for love, not to receive it. That he was expected to provide security for someone who confuses comfort with boredom. That in this modern market, effort is a liability, not a strength. Because if you give too much, you become predictable. If you care too soon, you become replaceable. It's a world that punishes sincerity and rewards indifference. So he adapts. He stops chasing chaos and starts chasing calm. He learns that peace is cheaper than heartbreak, and silence is safer than explanation. He becomes selective, Not because he's bitter, but because he finally understands the cost of access. He's not afraid of being alone. He's afraid of wasting himself on people who see connection as a competition. That's not coldness. That's clarity learned through pain. People say men have changed. No, they've awakened. They're not pulling away from love. They're pulling away from illusion. They're no longer chasing validation in a system that profits from their effort and mocks their sincerity. They've seen what happens when good men give everything, and they're done giving to what only takes. If you're a man listening to this, you know that feeling. That quiet moment where you realize peace feels better than being understood. That calm where you no longer need to prove your value to people who benefit from your doubt. That's not giving up. That's evolution. And if you've ever been there, drop a comment. Because the truth is, you're not alone. Every man who's ever chosen silence over chaos knows walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. Here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud. Most people aren't single because they're too good for love. They're single because they overvalue themselves and underestimate reality. Modern dating isn't broken by luck. It's broken by ego. Everyone's chasing the perfect partner while refusing to look in the mirror. Men see it clearly now. They watch women demand loyalty while rewarding chaos. They hear, "I want a real man" from people who can't handle real standards. They see effort mocked as desperation and stability labeled as boring. And eventually, something inside them just switches off. They don't argue. They don't explain. They just stop playing. Because once you recognize delusion, you can't unsee it. Social media made it worse. It gave average people celebrity egos. A few likes, a few DMs, and suddenly everyone thinks they're the prize. Attention feels like power, but it's not. It's counterfeit confidence. Real value doesn't come from validation, it comes from reality. And reality always catches up. When the filters fade, when the options shrink, when time starts collecting its debts, all that fake confidence turns to quiet panic. Women were told they could have it all, and maybe they could, but nobody told them they couldn't have it all forever. They traded partnership for independence, commitment for attention, and now wonder why men have stopped showing up. But why would they? You can't expect men to compete for people who treat connection like a convenience. Men didn't disappear, they got smarter. They stopped chasing people who confuse standards with entitlement. They stopped auditioning for approval, because you can't impress someone who's addicted to being unimpressed. They realized that peace feels better than performance, and the applause of strangers can't compete with self-respect. So now there's a quiet shift. Fewer men chasing, more men choosing. Fewer men begging, more men building. The dating market calls it a crisis. But it's not a crisis, it's correction. Reality is just reclaiming balance. And maybe that's what needed to happen. Because when effort gets mocked and delusion gets rewarded, the only rational response is to walk away. Men didn't ruin dating, they just stopped subsidizing the fantasy. Men didn't stop loving women. They just stopped loving the chaos that comes with them. Somewhere along the way, relationships turned into risk management, too much cost, too little return. Every man hits that breaking point once. It's not a meltdown. It's a quiet decision made in the back of his mind, never again. Because peace hits different once you've lived without it. Men used to crave attention, validation, affection. Now they crave silence, predictability, stability. Not because they're emotionless, but because they've learned that peace feels better than passion that burns everything down. When he comes home to quiet, to space, to freedom that's not loneliness, that's luxury. The world keeps telling men to open up, to talk about their feelings, to be vulnerable. But when they do, they're mocked, ignored, or weaponized. The same society that preaches empathy laughs at men who show it. So men learned a new language: silence. They don't yell anymore. They withdraw. They don't prove their value. They preserve it. They stopped trying to explain pain to people who only listen when they benefit from it. That shift doesn't come from hate. It comes from exhaustion. A man who's been blamed for too long stops asking to be understood. He stops negotiating for peace and starts protecting it. Because once he sees how fragile peace is, he builds his whole life around keeping it. Gym, work, focus, routine, purpose. It's not obsession. It's therapy. Men have learned that progress doesn't argue, and purpose never lies. Now look around. Men are calmer, quieter, harder to manipulate. You can feel it. They've detached from the noise. And in that detachment, they've found control. You can't shame a man who doesn't need attention. You can't guilt a man who's fine being alone. You can't control a man who doesn't fear losing you. That's real power, not the loud kind, but the kind that can walk away mid-sentence and never look back. The same men who were once called weak for caring are now being called cold for not caring enough. But they're neither. They're balanced. They've learned the difference between love and liability. They've stopped building peace for other people and started building it for themselves. This is the quiet revolution nobody predicted: men choosing solitude over submission. They're not anti-women. They're pro-peace. They've seen what constant compromise does to their sanity, and they've had enough. They've turned loneliness into clarity, and clarity into armor. If you're watching this and you've felt that same shift, that moment where peace felt better than being understood, then you already know this isn't withdrawal. It's awakening. Men didn't fall behind. They evolved. If you are one of the men who chose silence over performance, drop A in the comments. We see you, and you're not alone. Love didn't die because people stopped caring. It died because people started performing. Modern dating isn't about connection anymore. It's about attention. Everyone wants to be seen, but nobody wants to see. Social media turned intimacy into marketing. What used to be private became public currency. Every moment now needs proof pictures, captions, filters. You're not building love. You're building a highlight reel. Couples don't talk about feelings anymore. They stage them. The goal isn't connection, it's confirmation. Look, I'm wanted. Look, I'm winning. But what happens when the camera's off? Nothing. Because the performance ends when the audience leaves. Dating apps made it worse. One swipe, and you feel like a god. Infinite options. Endless validation. But the more choices people get, the less they can choose. Everyone's disposable now. Connection used to mean you're special. Today, it means you're next. Attention has become the cheapest drug in the world. Quick hit, no commitment. And when everyone's high on validation, love doesn't stand a chance. Men saw it first. They realized that attention isn't affection, and affection isn't love. They watched women trade real effort for online admiration. They watched relationships crumble under comparison, every man measured against a stranger on a screen. And they understood something women haven't yet. You can't compete with a fantasy. You can only walk away from it. The tragedy is, most people aren't evil, just empty. They've mistaken dopamine for devotion. They're chasing moments instead of meaning. They don't want partners. They want witnesses. Someone to validate the image they're selling of themselves. Love used to require vulnerability. Now it just requires Wi-Fi. And that's why everything feels hollow. Conversations sound deep but go nowhere. Affection looks warm but feels cold. People say, "I miss you," just to hear it back. Nobody's building anymore. They're just broadcasting. The more we share, the less we feel. Because when love becomes content, emotion becomes marketing, and people become disposable. Men are done pretending that's normal. They're not bitter. They're bored. They don't want to compete with algorithms or prove their worth against filters. They're done chasing validation that expires every 24 hours. They want peace, and peace doesn't post. This is the collapse of connection. Not loud, not sudden. Just quiet decay. One staged smile at a time. And when the last bit of realness finally disappears behind all the filters, men will still be there, sitting in silence, watching the world trade authenticity for approval. Because at some point, someone has to say, attention killed love, and now, silence is the only thing left that's still real. Men didn't disappear from the dating world, they recalculated. When the numbers stopped making sense, they stopped spending energy. Not out of fear, out of logic. You can't keep investing in something that keeps losing value. And that's what modern love became: emotional inflation. Too expensive to afford, too unstable to trust. So men did what men always do when the system fails: they rebuilt. They turned withdrawal into strategy. They started fixing the one thing they could control themselves. Every hour they used to waste chasing validation got redirected into discipline. Every argument became a workout. Every heartbreak became a lesson. Every silence became space to grow. They stopped waiting for peace and started engineering it. That's what people don't understand. The new generation of men isn't lazy, bitter, or broken. They're focused. They've stopped competing for validation and started competing with yesterday's version of themselves. The gym replaced the chase. The grind replaced the gossip. Progress replaced approval. Because when you realize nobody's coming to save you, you start saving yourself, and that clarity is addicting. Society still tries to shame them for it. Toxic, emotionally unavailable, afraid of love. But it's not fear, it's awareness. They've seen what unconditional giving does to men in a world that celebrates taking. They've watched others lose everything: time, money, sanity, trying to prove they're worthy of people who never valued worth in the first place. And now, they're done bleeding for applause. This reset isn't rebellion, it's realignment. Men are redefining success, not by who they can impress, but by what they can build. It's not about being liked anymore, it's about being free. The same world that mocked them for caring now fears their silence. Because silence can't be manipulated. You can't guilt a man who's not afraid to walk away. You can't shame a man who doesn't need your validation. And here's the irony: when men stopped chasing everything, everything started chasing them. Opportunities, success, peace. The absence of chaos made space for clarity, and that clarity made them untouchable. This is the reset. Not loud, not bitter, not vengeful. Just men finally choosing logic over lust, focus over confusion, stillness over struggle. They're not trying to fix the world anymore. They're fixing themselves. Because at some point, every man realizes the same truth. Peace isn't something you find. It's something you build once you stop building it for everyone else. They told men to open up and laughed when they did. Told them to try harder, then ghosted them anyway. Told them to do better and punished them for it. Now they're gone, and suddenly, everyone's confused why. The loudest change in the world right now isn't noise, it's silence. Men didn't rise up with slogans or protests. They simply stopped showing up. No arguments, no debates, just absence. And that absence is starting to shake everything built on their effort. Because when men stop giving energy, the world starts losing power. You can already feel it. Fewer dates, fewer marriages, fewer families forming, workplaces struggling to motivate, entire industries built on male effort and desire slowing down. For years, society demanded that men keep performing no matter how little they got back. But performance without purpose always ends. And now, it's ending. This isn't rebellion, it's correction. A silent revolution built on awareness instead of anger. Men aren't fighting women. They're just refusing to fight for illusions. They've stopped trying to prove their worth in systems that profit from their failure. They're done being the emotional and financial engine of a game designed to drain them. That's why this shift feels different. It's not chaos. It's calm. Not destruction, but detachment. Men have realized that true power isn't control, it's freedom. The freedom to walk away, to say nothing, to protect their peace without asking permission. You can't argue with silence. You can't guilt a man who's not afraid to lose. You can't manipulate someone who's no longer listening. The same silence that used to be mocked as weakness has become their weapon. The world keeps asking, where did all the good men go? They didn't disappear. They simply went where they were respected. They stopped pouring into cups that never filled theirs. They stopped explaining themselves to people who only hear what hurts them. And now, the balance is shifting. For the first time in decades, men hold the one thing the world can't control: detachment. They're no longer moved by guilt, approval, or expectation. They've learned to value peace more than being liked. That scares people, because a man who doesn't fear being alone can't be controlled. This is the silent revolution, not a war, but a withdrawal. A quiet, calculated return of power back to the individual. Men are no longer running from pain. They're walking toward clarity. And the quieter they get, the more the system begins to crack. Because every revolution starts the same way, not with noise, but with refusal. Men didn't vanish. They evolved. The same men who used to chase approval now chase progress. The same men who once apologized for existing now walk with quiet certainty. The world called it detachment. But it's actually discipline, the kind that comes when you've been burned enough times to stop touching fire. They no longer move from emotion. They move from clarity. They don't respond to chaos. They remove themselves from it. You can feel it in their presence, grounded, still, unmoved. They don't need to prove they're strong anymore, because restraint has become the new definition of strength. When you've seen how easily peace can be destroyed, you start treating calm like gold. Society can't shame these men anymore. Call them cold. They'll smile. Call them bitter. They'll stay silent. Call them afraid. They'll keep building, because they finally understand something the world doesn't. Validation is temporary, but self-respect is permanent. Once a man knows his worth without needing to announce it, he becomes untouchable. You can't manipulate a man who no longer needs your approval. You can't seduce him with distraction when he's already fulfilled. You can't threaten to leave when he's not afraid of being alone. That's real power, not dominance over others, but mastery over self. A man like that doesn't need to win arguments. He wins by walking away. This is the new evolution: men who no longer react. They redirect. They're not trying to change the system anymore. They've outgrown it. They've stopped waiting for fairness and started creating their own rules. They no longer need to be understood. They just need to stay steady. And that steadiness, that's what terrifies the world, because calm men can't be controlled. They don't shout, they don't chase, they don't beg. They just move forward, quietly, relentlessly. The unbreakable man isn't loud. He's focused. He's not emotional. He's exact. He doesn't fear loss because he's already found himself. He is proof that strength isn't about how much you can fight for others. It's about how much peace you can protect within yourself. Clarity is power, and power doesn't chase. Maybe this was never a story about men giving up. Maybe it's about men remembering who they are. For too long, the world told them to prove themselves, work harder, care more, apologize faster. But somewhere along the way, they realized something no one wanted them to notice. Peace is more valuable than approval. That's why they stopped chasing. Not because they hate love, but because they finally saw what love had turned into: performance, conditions, transactions. They didn't stop believing in connection. They just stopped believing in illusion. You can feel it now. The world is quieter. The same men who once begged to be seen have become ghosts, moving through life with calm precision. They don't argue. They don't announce. They just evolve. Because when you've lived long enough being misunderstood, silence becomes its own language. This isn't bitterness. It's balance. It's the correction that always comes after chaos. When giving stops being appreciated, giving stops. When peace stops being respected, peace leaves. And when men stop being heard, they stop speaking. But here's the twist, that silence isn't defeat. It's discipline. It's men choosing to protect what the world keeps trying to take their focus, their dignity, their calm. You can call that cold if you want. But it's not cold. It's clarity. So if you felt that shift, that quiet moment when you stopped arguing and just understood, you already know what this is. It's not withdrawal, it's awakening. And the truth is, when clarity shows up, everything that's fake collapses. Because peace doesn't chase. Peace doesn't compete. Peace doesn't explain. Peace just wins. Quietly.